Hi guys, it's Jenny, welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 12 of 12 Days of Christmas Conspiracies. Can't believe we're on the final day. That is insane. So in today's video we are going to be talking about the 5 Sodder children. And of course before I start I just want to say a disclaimer. I mean absolutely no harm or disrespect to anybody involved in this situation. This is just information that I found online and I put it together in one video to share to you guys. So George Sodder was born in Tula, Sardinia in Italy in 1895. In 1908 his older brother and himself immigrated over to America. However, as soon as George was cleared by customs in Ellis Island, which was in Upper Bay, New York, which at the time was the biggest immigration inspection station in America and remained that way for the next 60 years. But as soon as George was cleared, his older brother actually returned back to Italy, and over his life in America George actually never spoke about why he decided to immigrate to America and why his older brother didn't. So George eventually found work on the railroads in Pennsylvania, where he would carry water and other supplies to the workers there, and eventually he started his own trucking company which involved hauling coal that was mined in the region. This was where he met Jenny Cipriani, who was the daughter of a storekeeper in the area, and she had also immigrated from Italy to the US in her childhood, and the two fell in love and married soon after meeting. And so the newlyweds soon settled just outside nearby Fayetteville, I think that's how you pronounce it, which at the time had a large population of Italian immigrants, so they were surrounded by people that spoke their language, so they just felt a lot more comfortable there. And they lived in a 2-story timber frame house which was around 2 miles away from the centre of town. So in 1923 they actually had their first of 10 children, and his name was John. And at this point George's business was doing really well and they became one of the most respected middle-class families around. However, George had very strong opinions about many different subjects and he wasn't scared to express these opinions. It didn't matter who it was, he wasn't bothered about telling people about his different opinions, especially about the Italian dictator at the time, Benito Mussolini. And his opinions on him actually led to a lot of arguments with different members in their community. So the last of the Sodder children, Sylvia, was born in 1943, and by that time their second eldest son Joe was actually off fighting in World War II. However, George's criticism of the late dictator at the time, Benito Mussolini, I believe he wasn't the dictator at that time, still left people very angry with George. And in October of 1945 a visiting life insurance salesman actually said to George that his house would go up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed. This was because of the dirty remarks that you have been making about Mussolini. And then another visitor to the house actually for some reason took the opportunity to go round to the back where he saw a fuse box and actually told George that this would cause a fire in the house someday, which George was very confused about this because he had just actually had the house rewired because they installed a new electric stove, and the guy who installed it said that the house was perfectly safe, so he found this very confusing. So in the weeks just before Christmas, his eldest son John had actually noticed a strange car parked outside their house a lot, and the people inside the car were always watching the Sodder children as they returned home from school, so of course this was very suspicious. So on Christmas Eve of 1945, the Sodder family celebrated it like any other Christmas Eve. Marion, who was the oldest daughter, actually worked at a dime store in the nearby town, and she decided to spoil 3 of her younger sisters, Martha, who was 12, Jenny, who was 8, and Betty, who was 5, and she decided to spoil them with some new toys that she bought at her work. And the children were so excited by this, like any other child would be around Christmas time to get new toys, or any time of the year actually. So they actually asked their mother if they could stay up past their bedtime to play with these toys, and that was around 10 p.m. so their mother Jenny agreed, as long as 14-year-old Maurice and 9-year-old Louis, who were the two eldest boys there at the time, were still awake with them, and as long as they promised to put the cows in and feed the chickens before going to bed themselves. So at the time, George and the two eldest boys, John, who was 23, and George Jr., who was 16, had spent the day working with their father, so they were already in bed asleep. And after Jenny had reminded Maurice and Louis of their chores they had to do before bed, she took the youngest child, Sylvia, who was 2, up to bed with her. So at around 12:30 a.m. the phone actually rang, so Jenny woke up and went downstairs to answer it, and on the phone was actually a woman that Jenny didn't recognise the voice of, and so she asked for the woman's name but she didn't recognise the name either, and she could hear like laughing from the lady and like glasses clinking in the background. So she just dismissed this, saying that they had gotten the wrong number, and she just hung up the phone. So as she hung up the phone, she actually noticed that the lights were still on and the curtains weren't drawn, which was two things that the children always did before they went up to bed if their parents went to bed before them. And she actually saw that the eldest daughter Marion was asleep on the sofa, and so she just assumed that the other children who had stayed awake with Marion had gone up to bed themselves, so she just switched the lights off and drew the curtains and returned back upstairs to bed. At 1 a.m. Jenny woke up again to the sound of something hitting the tin roof and kind of like rolling off it. So of course she stayed up for a while listening to see if she could hear anything else, but after hearing nothing she just went back to sleep again. And then just half an hour later she woke up again to the smell of smoke, and when she got up to go see where it was coming from, she noticed that George's room that he used for his office was on fire around the telephone line and fuse box. And so of course she woke George up, who then woke up their eldest sons. So both of the parents and 4 of their children, Marion, Sylvia, John and George Jr., managed to escape the house, and as they did this they frantically shouted upstairs to the other children who were sleeping in the attic to wake them up to get out of the house, as it was literally going up in flames. And the stairway actually going up through the attic was already in flames, so they couldn't even go up there themselves to wake them up. They literally had to scream up the stairs. So of course their phone wasn't working, so Marion actually went to a neighbour's to use their phone to ring the fire department, and a driver on a nearby road also saw the flames and called the fire department also. So in the meantime, of course, there were still 5 of their children up there trapped in the flames. So George climbed up the wall to the attic barefoot and smashed the window into the attic to try and get in and try and get the children out. And him and his sons actually intended to use the ladder to get the children to safety. However, it wasn't where it usually was, which was just resting against the side of the house, and they couldn't actually find the ladder anywhere. They then attempted to use the water barrel to put out the flames, but unfortunately this was frozen solid. So George actually tried to pull both of his trucks up to the house to use them to help like get the children out, but neither of the trucks would start, even though the day before they started and worked perfectly fine. So this was like really strange. And after trying absolutely everything to get to the 5 children, the Sodder family realised there was nothing they could do, so they stood there watching their house go up in flames over the next 45 minutes. So the fire department didn't actually arrive until 8:30 in the morning, hours after the fire started and ended, and this was because they were really low on staff due to obviously the war going on, and so they relied on like individual firefighters having to call one another to get them over there. And at this point the house was complete ashes, there was nothing left of it. And so one of the firefighters, who was actually Jenny's brother, could do nothing but just look through the ashes to find some remains of the children. By 10 a.m, Chief F.J. Morris told the Sodders that they couldn't find any remains of the children, no bones, no clothing, nothing of the children remained. So it was believed that the fire had been so hot it had actually cremated the bodies. And the fire was actually determined to be started by faulty wiring and was just determined to be a complete accident. The parents were of course told to just leave the house alone so that the fire marshals could go in and do a more thorough investigation to see if they could find anything, but both George and Jenny couldn't bear the sight of their burnt down house and burnt children, so George decided to bulldoze over it with 5 meters of dirt with the intentions of turning it into a memorial garden for the 5 children. On January 2nd, 1946, they had a funeral for the 5 children. However, George and Jenny didn't attend because they were too grief-stricken, but the surviving children did attend. So moving on to the suspects for this case, there are of course a few suspects, but because of the time it happened and like the situation, it was very hard to prove that like an individual person did this on purpose. So there was actually a strange man witnessed stealing the ladder and cutting the phone line of the Sodder's house. However, this man was never considered a suspect and was just fined for stealing the ladder, which is so odd to me. Like, why isn't that an obvious suspect? But for some reason they just didn't think he was a suspect. A bus driver actually claimed that he saw what he described as fireballs being thrown onto the roof of the Sodder's house, which again is very suspicious. There was also many people who claimed that they actually saw the 5 Sodder children after the fire, so when they were supposed to be dead, they actually claimed that they saw them like in the car going out for breakfast, which is very odd. So John Sodder, who was the oldest of the Sodder children, claimed in an interview after the fire had happened that he had gone up to physically try and wake the children and saw the children, tried to wake them up to like alert his siblings so they could get out to safety. However, he then later changed his statement, saying that he just simply called up the stairs like the rest of the family did to the children. So although there were some like witnesses and different suspects, none of them were charged with starting the fire, as the police just believed that it was an accident and that it was just a faulty fuse box that started the fire. So the family actually tried to get the case reopened as they believed that their children were still alive. They put up several billboards and offered rewards for anybody who had information on the case. However, the police continued to believe that it was an accident that the fire started and that the children did die in the fire and there was no crime whatsoever involved in the fire in this house. However, what was very weird was that many of like their household items still remained in the ashes after the fire, like different kitchen utensils, parts of the tin roof were still there after the fire. So the fire wasn't hot enough to melt these objects. However, it seemed to be hot enough to entirely cremate 5 bodies, which is just weird. And Jenny actually read a newspaper account of a house fire that happened around the same time, and this killed a family of 7. However, skeletal remains were still found of all 7 of the family members. So to try and prove that there was no way this fire was hot enough to cremate her 5 children, she actually burned animal bones, and none of them were entirely cremated. And so she actually contacted an employee of the crematorium, and they told her that bodies, when they're cremated, they are burned in flames that are around 2000 degrees Fahrenheit for at least 2 hours, which is way longer and way hotter than the fire that happened at their house. So this showed that there was no way these bodies could be entirely cremated. So of course that made them think that their children were still alive and maybe managed to escape before the fire happened. So of course they considered the fact that their trucks wouldn't start when George tried to pull them up to the side of the house. Both the trucks wouldn't start even though they were working perfectly fine the day before, and so George believed that the trucks had been tampered with, perhaps by the same man who sneaked in and cut the phone line. However, in 2013, one of his son-in-laws had an interview with Charleston Gazette Mail, and he believed that George and his sons might have, in their haste to start the trucks, flooded the engines. So he stated that the trucks weren't tampered with, they just flooded the engines when they quickly tried to start the trucks, which I guess could be possible, but I'm no mechanic, I don't know anything about cars and engines, but I guess this could be a reasonable explanation for why the trucks didn't start. So going back to that weird phone call that the Sodder house got, that Jenny picked up coming from that woman, some people believe that this had something to do with the fire being started. So they actually contacted the woman who made the phone call, and she just said that it was a wrong number dial on her part, and so this couldn't be used as any evidence towards the fire being started, so it wasn't looked into further. So many years later, in 1968, a detective wrote an article on the event, and after that the Sodders actually received mail from someone in Kentucky. However, there was no address listed on this mail, so they had no idea who it came from. There was just a picture inside of a boy who claimed he was their missing child Louis, all grown up, and on the back of the picture it said, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, I lil boys," I have no idea what that stands for, and then A90132, or it could be A90135. Again, I have no idea what that stands for, but that's pretty weird that they got that through the post. And if you look at the pictures, it actually does look like Louis grown up. However, many believe that this was just a hoax by like someone trying to prank the family, which is so sad if it is. But the Sodder family truly believe that this was their son Louis trying to contact them, and they believe that this was proof that their children did escape and are still alive. So they actually hired a private investigator to look into this case further, and they sent him out to Kentucky, but he never returned and they never heard from him again, which is so strange. So I think as of 2015, the youngest child, Sylvia, is the only member of the Sodder family who is still alive, and she continued to find out what happened to her 5 siblings, but still nothing has come about it. We still don't know what actually happened to them, which is so sad. But yeah, that's all the information I have on this case. I think they were maybe taken before the fire started. I don't believe that they died in the fire because, like they said, there's no physical way that they could have been entirely cremated. So whether maybe there were some remains and they were just hidden from the family for whatever reason, I don't know. It's still really sad that they didn't know what happened to their 5 children. But yeah, that is it for this video, and that is the last episode in this 12 Days of Christmas conspiracy theories. I can't believe that it's over. Like, wow, I'm very proud of myself for doing all this, to be honest. I've had so much fun doing these videos, like researching for them. I've really enjoyed it, so I definitely want to do some more videos like this on like unsolved murders, unsolved mysteries. Like, I find them so interesting and I love researching about them, so I definitely want to do some more of these. I just want to thank everybody who watched these videos in this series, whether you've just watched one or whether you've just watched this one or you've watched them all. Thank you so much to everybody who has watched them. So if you enjoyed this one, please make sure to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to my channel down below. I'm not sure when my next video is going to be going up after this because it is Christmas tomorrow. Happy Christmas everybody, hope you have a wonderful day. Yeah, I'm not sure when my next video is going to be going up or what it's even going to be, but subscribe so you don't miss out on it when it does go up. I hope you are having a lovely Christmas Eve, a lovely day wherever in the world you are, and I will see you in my next video. Bye guys!